Conversations, episode 18. First-time listeners, welcome in. Long-time listeners, welcome back. Hopefully, either way, you guys stay with us moving forward. And if you have not yet, go ahead and show us some love on the socials. We are on Facebook, X at KBEX_ATC, Instagram at cornversationspod. And if you want to interact with us in any way or just let us know how we're doing, old school style, you can send a mail to us at cornversationspod@gmail.com. We really appreciate all the likes, follows, ratings, subscribes, everything you guys can do. It helps us out quite a bit as far as those algorithms are concerned. And we just really like to see that you like us as well. So we've got a big week coming up. We're in the middle of a big week as well. College football in full swing here with just one game left. And then the NFL playoffs now are done with the wild card weekend. So we're heading into divisional weekend as we record this episode. So we will stick to football for the most part in this episode. We've got a couple of topics about college football. We'll talk the setup as far as where these games are being played for the playoff and whether it's a good thing or maybe there needs to be some sort of tweak to that. And then we'll shift to a conversation that really came up thanks to some graphics that I saw in the Peach Bowl last week about Indiana and comparing them to one of the more dominant teams in college football we've seen in recent memory, the 2020 LSU football team. And then we'll dive into the mailbag and we'll talk a little bit of NFL related to the coaching carousel, which has already gotten into full swing here even before the season is over. So before we dive right into things, though, good news. We've got another guest, second week in a row. I think that's the first time on the pod we've had back-to-back episodes with a guest. So really happy about that. And this one is a new one. You guys have not met him before, but really excited to talk ball with him. And the first topic we're going to hit today is something that we talked about off the record. So we're going to bring it to you guys here live. So without any further ado, want to give a warm welcome to my buddy, the Kernel, and I'll let you guys figure out how you spell that, given the episode title and everything we've got going on for Conversations. Kernel, how you doing, buddy?
KBEX, it is an absolute honor to be on this podcast. 18 episodes. Conversations is legal, baby. You know,
that's right.
Did you enlist in the draft yet?
I think they do that for you now, right?
Couldn't tell you. I don't remember.
Okay. If they're bringing it back,
they did. You never know. But yeah, enlist in the draft. What else? You're legal now, so Conversations can't do anything too stupid. We can still stay on our parents' insurance. I think that's about all I got. 18.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great to be here. Long-time listener, first-time caller, long-time reader. Couple articles here and there, including NFL Survivor, my favorite one. But I'm really excited to get talking about our topics today. Obviously, football season winding down, so it's still on everybody's mind. Yeah, great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really excited to have you, and anybody who really wants to do the digging there as far as your articles on Around the Corner concerns, they're going to be able to find that linkage there and see where you used to go by. But I think the Kernel is a great name, and hopefully we'll stick with you moving forward and have you back on for future episodes as well. But yeah, let's dive right into it. We were talking about this in our group chat last week, and it seems like for this topic, we are on opposite sides of the table as far as where we think realistically things might go if there were any tweaks to the system. But with the college football playoff, we of course have first round home games at the higher seed site. And after that, what we do is we see the traditional bowl system take over. And you've got the Peach Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, Rose Bowl, et cetera, kind of doing a little bit of a carousel to see who gets to host the quarterfinal games, semis, and then, of course, you've got the national title game, which will which will do round robin between some of those sites as well. And something that you brought up in our conversation that we had a week ago that we'll share now with the listeners, you feel like there is an opportunity for college football to increase interest, not only from the fans watching the game, but primarily fans that get to go to the game by having every one of these games at a home site. And I'll let you explain kind of what your plan is for college football if they were to do something like this. And then what we'll do is just kind of go back and forth, because I'll just let everybody know up front. I don't I don't agree with that. I don't know that it's a good idea. And at the very least, I don't think they'll ever implement it. But I'll give you the floor and let you talk about why you think it's a good idea.
Yeah, so you kind of just said it, why they'll never implement it. I mean, I'm going to give you all my wishes and what I think would be best for the sport, the fans, the teams, but in all honesty, like money, like honestly, money is just going to control everything. So everything I feel like I'm going to talk about is wishful thinking, and money kind of runs everything, and it won't happen. So, with that being said, I think the biggest appeal of college football is the traditions. I mean, you can go same exact sport to an NFL game and a college football game, and they are unbelievably different experiences. College football is clearly rooted on like tradition, atmosphere, gigantic stadiums, tailgating, campuses, the whole shebang. Everything is so different than the NFL. In a weird way, when we have way more neutral site games, whereas obviously the NFL has all the home field advantage, I feel like you get away from what makes college football great. Um, Now, kind of to like counter that, and I don't want to steal too much of what you're going to say, but like obviously, like the bowl games are also tradition as well, and I think that plays a big part in probably what you're going to say. But I was just kind of thinking, like, I don't agree a lot with Dan Lanning, but I think he's been pretty spot on with kind of what his teams had to deal with, or what his team dealt with last year. And then honestly, he was kind of batting for Texas Tech this year, where um, those first round games get that home field game, which I think can build some momentum, as you kind of saw with Ohio State, Tennessee. Um, they can build momentum, kind of get a lesser opponent, play that week, and then you're going to a team that's playing a bye, and that team that has a bye doesn't get the home field advantage. So, I mean, obviously the buys and stuff are a whole nother discussion, but I think those teams on bye should get a at least one home field advantage game. Like Dan Lanning said, that game should have been played in Lubbock, Texas, Texas Tech. Um, And then the Ohio State Oregon game the year before should have been played in Oregon. And who knows, like if things would have gone differently, maybe not, but it doesn't hurt. All right. It's called a home field advantage for a reason. So, and then just kind of the last thing is like the campuses and the fans deserve it. Like if you are a top four seed and you don't get a home game, like that sucks. Okay, like college kids are going to want to play at their home stadium. Hopefully, win that game. Fans are going nuts. Um, the campus will just be buzzing before, during, after the game, and you kind of get robbed of that. Now, yes, there are some cool bowls, but also I think there's some not as cool bowls. And the bowl game's a whole different experience with traveling and everything. So I'm just a huge proponent of I think there should be more home field advantages just because the campus and these unreal stadiums that seat 100,000, 90,000 people just create the best visuals, atmospheres. And I overall think it's better for the fans, which I know something that we touched on. So, um, yeah, I kind of laid out a couple things there, but those are kind of just my general ideas off the top of my head.
Yeah. No. Okay. So I think there's a couple of things that I want to hone in on, because
Hmm.
I would not disagree with you. Definitely from a tradition standpoint, pageantry standpoint, what can separate college football and really and I've talked about it in previous episodes before, what contributes to the soul of college football is the atmosphere that you're getting. And that's primarily driven by the home crowd and what's going on at specific stadiums, and there are differences, stark differences between those different stadiums that make college football fun. if you go and you watch a game at the SEC stadium versus something that you might see up north, there's there's a definite difference in atmosphere. And it's not that either one of them are bad, it's just different. And you don't get that at the pro level the same way that you do at the college level. And bringing that into the playoff format and having the biggest games of the season get to experience that, I think would be a good thing. Now, I'm not going to focus too much on the money aspect because I think it sounds like we're kind of on the same page that unfortunately none of this is ever really going to be taken seriously because of the money aspect. But one thing that you did bring up, and this is kind of the first point I want to talk about, is the stadiums. You brought up the stadium size. And I think that's one of the areas that I disagree with, that not every stadium, not every um, locale that could get a home game in the playoff, if it were to change in this way that we're theorizing, would be able to carry the way that you're talking about stadiums like Ohio Stadium and you know Beaver Stadium in Happy Valley and places like that, where legitimately you're talking about 100,000 plus seats, where you have the atmosphere carrying what's going on there. Just to kind of bring that into perspective, the two games that we saw last week in the semifinals, the Peach Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl, the attendances there were reported at the Peach Bowl 75,000, just over 75,000, and at the Fiesta Bowl it was a reported just under 68,000. And to compare those to the stadium sizes that you would have gotten if these games would have been home games for the teams that were the higher seed, in the case of Indiana that played in the Peach Bowl, the capacity of Memorial Stadium is 53,524. So you're talking about under, less than 20,000 seats, or excuse me, more than 20,000 seats less than what the Peach Bowl reported as their attendance last week. And then in the case of Vaught Hemingway Stadium, which is Ole Miss's home stadium, you're looking at a capacity of just over 64,000, which is right about in line with what you're seeing out of the Fiesta Bowl and their attendance from the game last week. Now, a good point to bring up here as we kind of go through that is the record crowd at Vaught Hemingway is 68,251, so in excess of what they call their capacity. And that game that has that record was actually the Tulane game from the first round of this year's playoffs. So it kind of supports your theory here that you get good crowds, but at the same time, when you consider Memorial Stadium, Indiana's stadium, is 20,000 seats less than what they were even able to get at the Peach Bowl. It that's a different story. And that would be a different story, I think, for a lot of programs, because not every program is playing in a stadium that's 90,000 capacity.
Yeah, and I think one thing I kind of want to clear up, because that's a good point about the stadium size, but so think about the Fiesta Bowl, right? There was multiple reports days leading up to it, whatever, that ticket prices were dropping, and you could get tickets that was like $40 or something. Like they just kept dropping, which makes sense because Arizona's pretty far from both of those schools. Um, but I think the thing is, while that stadium's bigger, or if you look at Indiana and the Peach Bowl, like the stadium's bigger, but the atmospheres would be totally different, I think, because all right, if that game's at home at Indiana or at Ole Miss, it's not as even as as a kind of um, separation between like let's say Miami fans and Ole Miss fans. Like if that game's at Ole Miss, like Ole Miss is going to dominate that. I think it's going to be way louder and way rowdier. I think some of the problems with these bowl games is that there is definitely a money and corporate aspect to it. I know we're going to talk about money, but like corporate aspect to it, where like I think a lot of people get tickets to the Fiesta Bowl. They don't necessarily get tickets to the Ole Miss Miami game, if that makes sense. Whereas if that game's at Ole Miss, that's the biggest game in that stadium's history. So that place is going to be nuts. There could be less people, and same thing with Indiana. I'm just using the Fiesta Bowl as the example, but I just think that atmosphere would be a lot rowdier, a lot crazier. Yes, is it a disadvantage for Miami? 100%, but that's what makes it an advantage. So I just think like the numbers are bigger, but the overall atmosphere is going to be crazier, I think.
Okay. I mean, so I'm not sure that I can really argue successfully in the case of what we saw from the Fiesta Bowl. Although I didn't think it was a bad atmosphere because I was paying attention to that in addition to the game, trying to understand, on things like third down, how loud is the stadium getting? And it felt to me, and of course I'm just watching it on a television, but it felt to me like it was a pretty decent crowd. However, when I'm looking at the Peach Bowl, then I would ask the question to you, did you think that was a bad atmosphere? Because what I saw in that game was that Indiana fans really dominated what was going on in the stands. And when Indiana made a big play, it was loud. When Indiana needed to stop, it was loud. And so I almost wonder whether or not it's not as much who's playing the home game, but what fan base we're talking about when we're looking at these teams in the playoff. Because at the end of the day, I think what we're seeing from Indiana, and this is probably a conversation that could really go down a rabbit hole, but Indiana football seems to be a dormant fan base that it's like a sleeping giant. Like these people are coming out in droves now and supporting a team that really hasn't done anything prior to 2 years ago. And now you see them traveling and filling up more than 50% of a stadium for a semifinal college football playoff game.
Yeah, absolutely. And the funniest part about that is while that can differ because of numbers and size of the fan base, that's all of sports is the funny part. Like, I'm a Cincinnati Bengals fan, right? So, like, there's been a lot of tough years, a lot of years where that stadium's been pretty empty or whatever. And then as soon as Burrow comes around and that Super Bowl run happens, you can't get tickets lower than $150 and they're selling out everywhere. You're traveling well. There's Bengals fans popping up everywhere. Like it kind of comes with the territory, but it is impressive what Indiana has done. I think the one thing I just want to say to reply to you is I think the games affected a lot of that. I mean, that Ole Miss Miami game rocked. It was back and forth, a lot of stuff happening. Where that Indiana Oregon game, there wasn't a whole lot for Oregon to cheer about. Um, and also just kind of proximity. I think the Fiesta Bowls might a little even where like they both had to go a decent amount of ways to get there. Whereas like I'd have to imagine Bloomington to Atlanta is a okay-ish drive, probably what 12, 13 hours, maybe I don't know.
Something like that. Yeah.
Whereas Oregon, yeah, you can't drive that. So I don't know if that played into it, but I think not. I don't think the drives have much to do with it as much as what you're saying is yes, like Indiana has never had the success as football. They'd have a Heisman Trophy winner, a dog of a coach. Like they're all on board. Like Oregon was the number one team in the country last year. Like making the playoffs is okay. Like we should. So so yeah,
Yeah.
it's that is interesting.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll bring up, and I know we both kind of agreed we weren't going to bring in the financial aspect of this because it really does. I mean, it kind of kills the debate to some extent. But I think one thing that is worth bringing up more so because it's questioning, okay, how would these teams actually feel about having a home game? When you consider that three of the four Power Four conferences actually split the revenue that's made from the college football playoff that a team within the conference makes. So, in the case of an SEC, a Big 12, or a Big 10 team, if that team goes all the way to the national title game and ends up winning it, a portion of the amount of money that they make from that playoff run does get distributed amongst the rest of the teams in the conference. The ACC is the only one today that does not do that. And so I guess the question there, if you're looking at it from a program perspective, would be, okay, if you're Ohio State, for example, and you get the opportunity to host, let's just say they go all the way through like they did last year, and you got to host a first round game, a quarterfinal game, and a semifinal game, and then let's just assume the national title game continues to be at a neutral spot. You're looking at 3 games that Ohio State and its program had to make sure that they hosted successfully in Columbus. And would they want to then share the revenue that they made from a run like that, knowing that they had to put together, all of the things that need to be done in order to host the game in Columbus, and there are costs associated with that. I start to wonder whether or not the programs would start to go, well, we did a large portion of the legwork here because it wasn't the Bulls putting this together. We want a bigger share of that revenue sharing, and then do the conferences maybe put a stop to that because it doesn't work out the way that it is working out today?
Yeah, that's a good point. Gotta pay the hot dog concession workers.
Yeah. So
Yep,
I don't know.
red
I
coats.
mean, I think we would all love to see home games. I would love to go to more home games as far as playoff atmosphere is concerned. But at the same time, I mean, I wouldn't mind traveling to Glendale and watching the team play in the Fiesta Bowl. And I don't know. I don't ever see it being the case. It sounds like you don't either. But in terms of whether it's a home run that every fan out there would feel like it's the right move to go to a game at home all the way through the playoffs, I think that there's still some question mark there. So yeah, for those listening, give us your thoughts. Let us know in the comments. Do you think home games all the way
Yeah.
through the playoffs is a good idea for the CFP, or do you like the way that it's currently set up? Kind of shifting gears here a little bit, staying in the college football realm. I don't know if you saw at Kernel when they were starting to run out of things to talk about as far as what was going on in the field in the Indiana Oregon game. There were some graphics I saw showing up where the obvious questions, right, about Indiana and how dominant they've been this year. Just truly, how dominant are they? And the the easy, I guess, least common denominator comparison that you could make because it's so recent of memory as far as dominant teams are concerned is the 2019-2020 LSU team, which of course was led by Joe Burrow. But just as a refresher for people that don't remember just how many NFL guys were on that team, here's a couple other names for you that were players on the team. Not all of them were contributors, but they were at least on the roster at the time. You've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Patrick Queen, Grant Delpit, Derek Stingley Jr., and Cade York. I mean, you look at that, Colonel. This to me, when you name off those names,
Thaddeus Moss.
yeah, you're looking at a team that, in my opinion, the 2000 what would it be 2001 Miami Hurricanes, that was an all time team. I think this LSU team definitely matches up well with that team when you're considering some of the best college football teams that have existed. What are your thoughts on Indiana? Do you think they belong in that conversation?
No, 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 no. I don't even think it's close, to be honest. Like, they're a great team. I don't want to sit here and say, "Oh yeah, they're overrated," blah blah blah. But like, you're talking about legit, probably the greatest college football team of all time. Like, I don't like there's been that graphic going around just like throwing up Joe Burrow stats to Mendoza's like it's not even close. All right. And then you get those clowns that are like, well, look what Joe Burrow had to throw to. He had the two best receivers that are in the NFL right now. And it's like you still gotta make the throws, dummy. Like Kyle McCord had Marvin Harrison Jr., Jackson Smith and Jig, all these guys, and he stunk. So like you can't say, oh, he had great weapons. So it's really not even close. Burrow's talked about as one of the greatest Heisman's of all time. And they say who's had the best Heisman season of all time? It's him. Um, like there were points this year where people were like, "Do we even give out the Heisman? Does anybody deserve it?"
Right.
And then because Mendoza beat Ohio State in the championship, they were like, "Okay, I think we're gonna give it to him." Like it wasn't just this runaway train of just like, "Oh my God, they're just dominating everybody." And the other thing I just think it's easy to point out is the coach matters. Like Coach O is not a great elite college football coach. He's on the beach right now with some honeys. Like he's like Signetti and his career's still young, but the whole Google me, I win thing is legit. Like there's no doubt about it. So um he has the way better coach. Now, I know that's kind of an argument as like, oh, is their team better? Like they had the better coach or whatever. But I think that just shows how much better that roster, that LSU team, how crazy they were. Was there because I'll be honest, what do you think, K Bex? If you went up to kind of casual college football fans this year, I think everyone would name Fernando Mendoza. He won the Heisman. How many other Indiana players do you think they could name?
I am not sure that there are a lot of casual college football fans who could name another player on that team. And The only way that you would get to 2, and this is a joke, but if they just said Mendoza thinking and you could say, "Okay, well, let's give him his brother," right?
His brother.
And so
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think that you look back at that LSU team, and I just named off like 8 or 9 guys that you can think of who are legitimate NFL players as well, and they were all on that team. And the other thing that you brought up, and I agree with, and this was going to be my counter, was because it's a full team situation, and you brought up the coaching thing already. You know, I'm not saying LSU won in spite of Coach O, but I don't think that what we've seen from Kurt Signetti this year would give us any reason to try to compare those two seriously. I mean, Signetti is doing something that is, frankly speaking, making people rethink what is possible in college football. I
Hmm.
mean, I, I didn't buy in last year, quite honestly. I wasn't sure yet. And I didn't buy in at the beginning of this year. I think
Yeah,
I predicted
absolutely.
Indiana was going to go like 6-6 or something. So he has blown my expectations out of the water for this program,
Hmm.
and people have bought in. I mean, it went from, hey, can he do this again, to now everybody's starting to legitimately call him potentially the next Nick Saban.
Right. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think from an on the field perspective, we're aligned here.
Hmm.
I don't know how you can really compare this team,
Yeah.
Indiana, to the talent that they had on that LSU team. However, when you consider the coaching staff and what's going on there, Signetti has these teams, or this team, excuse me, just better prepared than who he's going up against. I think
Yeah.
the graphic that made more sense than trying to compare Burrow to Mendoza and the team to LSU is the graphic that's floating around where they're talking about how many, I think it's what, blue chip or 5-star guys Indiana has on their roster versus how many Oregon, for example, had on their roster. And it's like a fifth of the number of guys that were coming out of school that Indiana got that were supposed to be, high level college football players. They're beating what on paper was supposed to be a much better rosters, and they're doing it in style. I mean, they're not just beating these teams, they're pummeling them.
Hmm. Yeah. And I kind of had another thought that I thought was a little interesting, but personally, I don't know if this team's better than the team after LSU, the 2020 Bama team.
Yeah,
If you look like, because we know from personal experience, like being Ohio State fans, like we watched that championship game, that team steamrolled everybody.
right.
And they were kind of similar to what Indiana was doing this year, but they were loaded. They also had a Heisman, Devonta Smith, right? Obviously, Mac Jones is he's not a Heisman winning quarterback like Mendoza per se, but I mean he started some NFL games, got drafted. But Jalen Waddle, he got hurt for the championship, didn't matter, still steamrolled. But then you look at all these other names: Najee Harris, Brian Robinson Jr., John Meach III, Patrick Surtain was on that team. Will Anderson Jr. was on that team. Brian Branch, Christian Barmore. They have tons of NFL guys on that team, and that team just dominated everybody. So I would even argue I think that team's better than this Indiana team right now. Once again, trying not to disrespect Indiana, but like that team was just an unstoppable force, and that Ohio State team was good. They also had a bunch of studs on that team, and I think that's the other thing that might be hurting Indiana a little bit is that it felt, I don't want to say a down year in college football, but it felt like there wasn't a bunch of elite teams. The normal elite teams felt a little down. Bama wasn't Bama, Georgia wasn't Georgia. Everyone thought Texas, Penn State were going to be good. They stunk. Whereas these LSU and Bama teams, that was still kind of, I feel like, the height of a lot of these like strong teams because you didn't have as much activity in the transfer portal. NIL wasn't a thing back then, so I think that just makes it more impressive for those LSU and Bama teams that they kind of did it then. Whereas I feel like it's kind of a give and take. It's a little more spread out right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. But I actually have not heard anybody bring up that Bama team that came right after LSU.
Yeah,
It's a little odd.
like that team's stacked. It was insane. I just remember watching that championship, and usually I'd be pissed off, but I'm just sitting here like, yeah, they were kind of better. Like they were absolutely better. You
Yeah,
just couldn't stop them.
I remember going into that game feeling like if they kept it close, that would be a win. It was one of the few instances as an Ohio State fan where you went into a game not expecting that you were going to have a legitimate chance to win, and
Yeah,
I think that speaks to how good that team, that Alabama team, was.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, okay, then final question on this topic then. Do you think because of the way that things are going in college football that we're going to see another LSU 2019 or Bama 2020 team? Or do you think that's a thing of the past at this point?
That is a great question. My initial reaction is no. I I think because of NIL and you're paying dudes and making contracts and friggin' college teams are tweeting out now like we have re-signed so and so. It's nuts. But I think because of that, it makes it that much tougher to keep a bunch of guys like that. Now, like, can it happen? Yeah, like Ohio, but like, look at Ohio State this year. That defense is one of the best that I think we've ever seen. Like, they're gonna have an unbelievable amount of draft picks on that defense, high draft picks, and like even they like didn't get it done in the end. Like, I think just in general, like, can you see a repeat of those teams? Like, yeah, probably, maybe someday, but like, I do think it makes it tougher now to retain all those guys. Because think about recruiting too. Like, you see Ohio State and all these other big programs, they're losing, like Caleb Downs. You're losing huge, big time. Now, that was a coach change, but you're losing these big time recruits early because you can't guarantee them playing time because you're already a really good team. And so instead of developing them and then they're good to go, they like to just jump ship and then where they can go play immediately. Um, so you don't get like a lot of those develop, and then we got some young guys. Like, I don't know. I do think it is tougher now just because they can go wherever they want. It's a free agency every single year. They're not
Right.
trapped.
Right. Yeah. The other thing that I think would make it hard for this ever to really occur again is that in order to stockpile that type of talent, it's one thing to keep them, but then in this day and age now, you're going to have to out in the open pay them. And so it's not just getting these guys to come to the school and stay long enough where they become the household names because, there were some guys on some of these programs that were talking about these elite teams that they were, freshman or sophomore when this was going on. So we're bringing them up as names, but the reality is they weren't, main contributors. In order for these teams to have elite guys that are main contributors, you're going to have to pay every single one of them. And I just don't know that
Mhm.
there are that many programs in the country who can afford to do that, let alone one that will get lucky enough to actually retain all of that talent. So I'm with you. I don't think that we're going to see very many teams that are going to reach that level of elite talent on the field. But maybe in different ways, you might see some elite coaching staffs, for example, or you might see a very, very strong G5 program that comes out and has a bunch of guys that they all scatter and go somewhere else after the season. But maybe we get a team from one of those conferences that does eventually break through and beats one of the G5 teams in the playoff. And I think, given especially the amount of, you know, uh, flack that we gave those teams this year, especially with Tulane and James Madison kind of getting wiped off the floor by the teams they played, that if a team from one of those conferences does actually beat one of the P4 guys, then that would be considered an elite version of what they are, which is at this point almost a different level of football than what you're seeing from the Power Four conferences.
Yeah, it's going to happen with Memphis next year. Calling it now. They load it up.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk Tigers at some point. Um, we're going to shift gears a little bit away from college football, a lot of it, I suppose, and hit up the mailbag question that was submitted last week. Thanks to
Oh,
Brennan, who is carrying the torch as far as mailbag questions are concerned. I think he's had pretty much every one of them. Yep,
thank
yep.
you, Brandon.
That's exactly right. So first off, Brennan, Texans over Seahawks was your pick, so that is still alive. You're doing better than K Bex because Duval did not work out, but we're not talking that today. We're talking head
Keep your head
coaching.
up, young man.
Head coaching carousel. So Brennan asked, can we get your take on the NFL head coaching openings and what the carousel will look like in the off season? So I guess to paint the picture there, at this point, 9 of the 32 teams do not have a head coach heading into the next season. So almost 30% of the league. So in terms of what's going to happen in the offseason, I think you're going to see these spots filled, but how much more is going to happen? I'm not sure we're going to see a lot more because we've already had a lot. So I think today what we want to try to focus on are those 9 openings, and what we've done here to help kind of balance the conversation is I've separated these 9 head coaching positions into what I think are um, 3 buckets. I've got a suspect bucket where I'm not really sure what's going to happen here, and I don't think they're the best openings. I've got an interesting bucket, which are things that in theory could go either way. And I think, Colonel, I'm going to ask for your opinion on whether they fall into this bucket or whether you would put them somewhere else. And then the desirable bucket. And I think those are the top head coaching jobs that are available in the league right now. And so each of these buckets has 3 teams that falls into them. We'll start with the suspect bucket just because I don't think that's going to be the focus here. But what I have in that listing are the Dolphins, the Raiders, and the Cardinals opening. So, Colonel, before we go any further there, do you have any heartache with any of those teams being in that bucket?
No.
Okay.
Um, the Dolphins one's interesting to me just because how they've crushed and come down to earth, Tyreek style, and um, I don't no, not really. I mean, the funny part about those is all 3 of those are desirable locations. Not that that matters much in the NFL, but those are all very nice cities. So if a coach is like looking to move somewhere nice, they go for it. But no, they all seem to be stuck in a purgatory quarterbackless. The Raiders is the only one where you got the number 1 pick. It seems like everyone's starting to think it's just going to be Mendoza. So I think that could be maybe a little interesting. Hey, you got a number 1 pick. Here's a quarterback coming in. Um, Go for it. And they have weapons. Bowers is one of the best tight ends in the league. Genty, they just drafted with a high draft pick. Like, I think that the Raiders is the only one that you probably could go into interesting just because of their draft pick.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Mhm.
I think that position looks like it has the most level of flexibility, both because they've got that draft pick. They've also got cap flexibility. But I think the thing that would scare me away if I were a seasoned veteran in the coaching realm is that there's like no stability there from the top level. I mean, they just brought in Pete Carroll. He's out. They've had this happen time and time again where it just doesn't seem like they have a true direction there. And so I don't see that being a place that a coach that feels like they can get a job elsewhere or are looking for the right fit is going to necessarily jump at. So I guess my overarching take from these 3 jobs are, and this is why I think it's so hard to try to predict who may land there, is that if you're a if you're a coach looking for their first head coaching job, or you're a guy who's trying to get back into things and is like, hey, I'm going to take a swing, I think those are the spots where they would land. And to your point, I don't think it hurts that it's a desirable location too. So I wouldn't be super surprised if you see a young guy who maybe hasn't had a shot at a head coaching job land in all 3 of those spots. Um,
Mhm.
the Raiders seems like it would be the best option. But yeah, the other 2, hard to say. And the Cardinals, to me, I mean, you don't know what's going on with Kyler Murray, and same thing, kind of some turnover there. I don't know.
Mhm.
All right, well, we'll then uh, move on to the interesting aspect, and the 3 that I have here. And I think the first one you could argue maybe belongs in the suspect area, but because of our listenership, I decided to put him in the interesting bucket. You've got the Browns, the Titans, and the Giants. What do you think about this listing here?
Yeah, so clearly it seems like this list is like terrible teams um with a young quarterback that didn't crap his pants this year. So like now I totally agree with you. I do think if it wasn't for your viewership K-Bex that the Browns would be probably more in the suspect group. And I honestly would probably switch them with Raiders personally. I just think the Raiders with the number one pick, getting Mendoza with their weapons, probably maybe a little bit more desirable. But then again, the Browns defense is very, very good. You have Myles Garrett on contract there. Um, it's just that offense is something. So, but no, it is very interesting. Those three. I think obviously the Giants one's the most interesting. The Titans, I think, still got a work to do. Cam Ward, I think, looked fine. Nothing crazy, but so the question I kind of want to ask about this group is: do you get a sense that people are more high on Jackson Dart right now than Cam Ward?
People in general, or are you asking me based on who I think might be good fits for the job, who would be high on Jackson Dart versus Cam Ward?
I was kind of just thinking in general because then I can kind of turn that into like, okay, if you're just based off, do they have a quarterback? Which job's more appealing? Because I don't know about you, I get a. I'll let you answer first. I like. Do you think if you're a coach going there looking towards the future, would you rather have Jackson Dart at the helm or Cam Ward?
Yeah. So personally, I was a big Cam Ward guy. I actually
Hmm.
picked him up in one of my fantasy leagues at the beginning of the season just in case he popped, and then I had him for some collateral. But um,
What place did you finish?
in that league,
Yeah.
seventh, so not very good. It's a it's a
Thanks, Cam Ward.
it's a dynasty league, so I was coming out of finishing ninth the season before. So anyway, personally, I like Cam Ward more than Jackson Dart. However, if you're asking me what I think the average fan thinks, I think that Jackson Dart was flashy this year. He showed some signs of brilliance. I think he paired up very well with Cam Scadaboo, and there was a lot more to like about what you saw out of New York this year than the very little that probably most people saw out of Tennessee. And the other thing that I'll say about Tennessee is, there were some people who were kind of high on Tennessee coming into the season and then just totally fell flat on those expectations. So I look at the Tennessee job potentially as the better fit for a coach, if you like Cam Ward. But in terms of where potentially would people prefer to go, I mean, the bright lights of New York seem to be shining right now, and there's a lot of things that people seem to like about Jackson Dart. And yeah, I mean, Cam Scadaboo's there. You got Malik Neighbors who's going to come back off of the ACL injury.
Hmm.
So there's definitely some talent there that I think people believe in. Whereas with Tennessee, I suppose you could say the talking heads, the pundits, some of them liked Tennessee, but so far there hasn't been a lot to show for out of that
Mm-mm.
franchise.
Quick, name a Tennessee Titans wide receiver.
Well, I don't know that I can. Who's the tight end who was catching the passes? Okun.
Oh, Chig.
Yeah, yeah,
Chigakonkwu.
yeah. Ogankwo.
Yeah.
Like he's doing as much work there as anybody, right?
No, so I wasn't trying to like bet. Like I was asking. Name a Tennessee Titans wide receiver.
Yeah, I
This is
don't.
bad. I feel like I should know one. They were always cheap on daily DraftKings.
I feel like
Surely Traylon Burks isn't still there.
no. Treylon Burks. He actually went to Washington.
Oh, your team. Go,
So
go Comms.
yeah. Um.
Hmm.
So yeah. I
But
mean,
so the reason I asked that is because I think you nailed it. Like you have Malik Neighbors, Scadaboo looks pretty good. I think Tyrone Tracy is a great back. Um, you kind of at least have something to start with there, and the big market and all that. But hey, Titans getting a beautiful new stadium. The Giant Stadium sucks.
do you have any names that you'd throw out there for any one of those three jobs on who you think might be a good fit?
So yeah, I have a whole list of like a bunch of stuff. I actually tried to predict all 9 openings. Um,
I'm selling you
but
short then. We can go back to the suspect ones if you want to. I have no names listed for those, but
you
I
know,
do I
yeah,
do for the others.
yeah, I can list some off. We can just kind of talk about because some of them are just kind of a whim, and some I feel like I did have some reasons for. But um, so I guess a couple. One thing I wanted to ask you was, all right, real quick, I'm gonna run down the list of fired coaches. You have Brian Callahan, or not fired slash resigned. Thanks,
Mhm.
Tomlin, you idiot. Brian Callahan, John Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin, Kevin Stefanski, Mike McDaniel, Jonathan Gannon, Raheem Morris, Pete Carroll, Brian Dable. I'm counting Dable because obviously it was earlier in the year. Now, which of those do you think would even get looks to being a head coach again this year? Not like down the road, like which of those do you, because obviously there's some the obvious ones, but then some I'm kind of interested to see if teams would hire him as a head coach that quick, you know?
Yeah. Um, I have 4 of them that I have on my list for various teams. I think 2 of them are gonna be the obvious ones that everybody would think, and then 2 of them maybe not. But the obvious ones, I think Stefanski and Harbaugh are both gonna get jobs somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think Brian Dable, if he is in the right situation with a quarterback who needs some mentoring, I think that that could be a good fit. And so people who are trying to connect the dots might know where I have him listed. And then the last guy is Mike McDaniel, which sounds ridiculous, but I just feel like he's going to be the one who
I
might slip in there and get one of these jobs, perhaps with
I'm
one of
with
those
you.
suspect teams.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm totally with you there. The only other one that I had to start because I started the same ones, and the only other one I brought up was I'm curious to see what Pete Carroll does. Like, I think he should just ride off into the sunset, get a cushy little broadcast gig, whatever he wants to do. But I don't know, guys like that seem to not be want to step away. And then the same thing is like, would teams be interested? I mean, yeah, it's Pete freaking Carroll, but dude's in great shape, but yeah, he's old. And then I just want to throw some names out there for some coordinators because I wasn't sure if you had any strong feelings on them. Which, when it comes to coordinators, I mean, I'm not going to act like I'm an NFL expert. Like some of these guys, I'm just like, I'm just going obviously based off the team. Like I don't know anything about the dude or whatever. But I mean, some of these names are familiar, you know, like Matt Nagy, the Chiefs OC.
Yep.
Clint Kubiak's a hot name.
Yep.
Seahawks OC. You got Robert Saleh, 49ers DC. You got Chris Shula, Rams DC. Dom Clegg, Saints DC. Jeff Halfley, Green Bay DC. Like, there's a lot of DCs, it seems like, that are hot names right now. Maybe they're seeing what all these other teams are doing, the Seahawks, the Broncos, and I think defense is kind of hot right now. Do any of those names make you feel a little bit nicey?
Yes, yes, a number of them
Mm,
do. I'll focus on the DC side of it because I think you bring up a good point. Normally, when I'm looking at these openings, I'm not thinking DC first. However, I think in a couple of these situations, it does make sense. And I don't want to maybe dive too deeply into our desirable bucket yet, but one of the teams that we have in there is where I think a DC may fit. And 2 of the names you brought up, Jesse Minter, and then also, I have Brian Flores as well as a name that I think might get another shot. And those are 2 guys that I look at on the defensive side that have, in my opinion, a good shot at landing one of these openings.
yeah, yeah, it's yeah, and that kind of leads to if you want to get into the kind of the maybe some fits or ideas with some of these teams, I think just kind of going based on what you just said, I think the Cardinals is a good place to start with a defensive minded coach.
Okay.
They got some weapons on offense, but like I just think their quarterback situation right now is like Kyler Murray doesn't seem like he's too great nowadays, but I still think he can be serviceable. I think he could pull the Sam Darnold role. So like I think that's a team that should just throw all their cards in on defense, and they got one of the top tight ends in the league. You got to really bank that Marvin Harrison starts to look the part. So like, do they hire a Robert Sala there? Do they look at Jeff Halfley? Like I don't like for some reason that just stuck out to me as maybe they should like focus on defense, just because they have the serviceable quarterback with good weapons around him. Whereas like the other ones, Dolphins, Raiders. I mean, I've already talked about the Raiders a decent amount. Um, I'm going to ask you kind of about one of your boys, your teams. What do you think the idea of Cliff Kingsbury with the Raiders? And I don't know if it's just because he's sexy and it's Las Vegas, but I see it.
Uh, I can't hate on that. I do have Kingsbury as a potential guy who could take a job. I have him listed as elsewhere, but I think the Raiders could be a good spot for him. The thing with him is he's a guy I think who could do what the Raiders tried to do this year and swung and missed big time, which is go and try to make a splash with a quarterback on the market rather than go and draft somebody. And I think Kingsbury is the type of guy who could find him. And honestly, okay, here's a since we're talking these teams right now, here's an interesting thing. What if Kyler Murray decided to leave Arizona and relinked up with Kingsbury in Vegas? Do you think that could work?
Hmm. I've always weirdly thought Kyler could work. I think he's been on some weird teams and some weird things happening, but I guess here's all I say. I think it can work. I don't think no chance it happens because they have the number one pick, right? So I think it is a cool scenario to think about, and I weirdly think it can work. I'm sure some people think that's friggin' nuts, but I just with that number one pick, I think they're taking Mendoza and not looking back.
Yeah. I mean, you could get a king's ransom for the
But
number one overall pick, which is why I say that, with as bare as we say this, but we talked Brock Bowers, we talked Max Crosby, we talked Ashton Janty. The cupboard is pretty bare beyond that. And so you could go and you could fill out various parts of the roster. And if Kingsbury really liked Kyler Murray, and I have to imagine he doesn't dislike him. I mean, they worked for a period of time that something like that might, I don't know. I don't know. I think you're right. Practicality would suggest they're going to take Mendoza, but it's an interesting uh, possibility.
yeah, I think kind of the thing you said is also another point where they will take him is the fact that they have Bowers, they have Genty, they feel like a team that's just a quarterback away. And I think while Kyler Murray's kind of, it almost feels like a band aid fix. Like they think Mendoza could be the stitch him up fix, I
Right.
guess.
Right.
But
Okay.
but yeah, the main point with those suspect teams is that all the guys I listed, because I threw Kubiak to the Dolphins. I didn't know what the heck to do with the Dolphins, but like the main thing about those three suspect teams is that I had coordinators for all of
Yeah. No, I think
them.
we're on the same page there, which
Yeah,
is that an experienced head coach who's looking
yeah.
for another job is not going to go to one of those spots. But for the interesting teams, let's start with the Browns and we'll work our way up. Who do you think is a good fit in Cleveland?
I actually put Brian Dable,
Okay.
and I'll be honest, I don't have any hunch. I don't really have great reasonings other than that he's a fat bald dude with a beard, and I think he would be the perfect image to be the head coach of the Cleveland Browns.
They've had that image before, right? With Kitchens.
Correct. Yeah, he had some hairs up there. Yeah,
He might have lost him during his
I think
tenure though.
so. Yeah, pulled him out. Jeez Louise. But I don't know. I think I'll be honest. If I was a team with it, I would be interested in Dable. I don't think he's a bad coach at all. I think that year he had with the Giants, I think he had something going. I think he's kind of gotten a raw deal at the end of it. I know I said I just hire him because he's a fat bald dude with a beard, but I do think that would be a good hire for the Browns. I think some of these other names that I'm sure we're about to talk about are ones that they would want, but I know they're under the interesting because of our fan base, and I know some of my friends are gonna get pissed off, but is the Browns' job desire? I don't know. They don't got the quarterback. They have the fourth pick. Do you know what pick they have?
I think it's fourth. I'll check that. Yeah, while we
But it's I don't know. Great defense, hell of a defense, best defensive player in the league. But man, that offense is rough everywhere. Um, but I don't know. Yeah, did you have any inklings or names that you kind of like to link there?
yeah. So in
Yeah.
Cleveland, and these are kind of ridiculous, I think, now having thought about it a little bit more. But honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if Cleveland did something ridiculous. I threw down Mike McDaniel. I think that again, I feel like for some reason he's gonna find a job despite what seemed like mass chaos down in Miami for most of the year. the other question mark I have here, and I think this one's kind of out there too, because your question about is the job desirable is a legitimate one. And I don't think this guy would consider something where you have to ask that question. But from a what does the franchise truly need perspective, this would be a great fit, which is does John Harbaugh, a culture builder, come over from Baltimore to Cleveland? I know I see you on the screen and you're shaking your head, and I agree. I don't think that there's any
Hell to the no, no,
yeah,
no.
I don't think there's any reality to this happening, but in terms of who could actually help fix some of the issues, you need a guy who's stable. You need a guy who knows how to build a culture. And that's what the Browns haven't had since they came back into the league, quite frankly. And I think that's the one thing that you could say about Harbaugh when he was in Baltimore that really can't be challenged is that they were a rock solid program and they had a good culture there. And so, the reason I bring that up is because I think it's already been kind of tossed around by some other outlets about, well, what about the crazy scenario where these guys just switch and you've got Harbaugh going to Cleveland and Stefanski going and making things right with Lamar Jackson? I find it highly unlikely, but and as far as fit, I don't know that it's a horrible play there.
I mean, sure. Yes, the Browns would definitely want John Harbaugh 100%. He's the best name on the market right now, but I also want to win the Powerball. Like that ain't
Right.
happening. Like I'm prepared to eat my words like an Arby's roast beef, but like I don't think it's
Yeah.
happening. The only thing that I will say is he's from Cleveland, right?
He is from
Now I don't
the
know. I
area.
don't know if that's. I don't know if he grew up a Browns fan or if he has any connection there. But I'm surprised I haven't seen that yet. But like, no, he's not. No, no, he ain't doing
All right.
that. Other thing I will say is we are on the same wavelength with McDaniel, which kind of leads into the next team. I think Mike McDaniel's a good fit in Tennessee.
Okay.
I just think the young quarterback, and then like the dude is friggin' weird. Like he's a weirdo. He's a character. He brings personality. I think that could be exactly what the Titans need. Um, I know it sounds weird to like connect it, but like they're bringing in a new stadium. Like they have their rookie young quarterback, first overall pick. Like I think he could be a weird hire that like where it could work. That just kind of gives some personality to the Titans. Because no offense to them, but like they haven't had a great like they don't really have an identity the past couple years. It's the Titans. Like I don't know what's going on. So I actually think that would be a good fit for him. Um, if he wants to. But yeah, I do think he is going to draw a lot of interest. He's kind of like Dable, where he had that season, right? Like that great season, and things kind of crashed down on him. Which same thing. I don't think it's entirely all on him with look at some of the things that his roster did, but um, you know, but I just think that'd be a decent fit.
Okay. Yeah, you've sold me a little bit on McDaniel in Tennessee. And the other thing I'll point out from a fit perspective, it's going to sound like it's not a fit, but yeah, with McDaniel being kind of an oddball dude, um, and I think Cam Ward, even as a rookie, kind of showing himself to be a true locker room leader. You could have this yin yang thing where it's like, well, Cam Ward's going to police himself in the locker room, so they don't need McDaniel to go in and like command the room. They just need him to go be the mad scientist and do what he does best and allow Cam Ward to grow within himself. And then, the asylum kind of runs itself, if you will. But um, I still kind of lean towards Brian Dable because I think that Cam Ward, as much as I liked him coming out of school, he does need some guidance. And I think Dable, in my opinion, is the best guy for that. And he's shown it,
Mm-hmm.
in past stops before. So that's where I have as my number one spot for Dable is Tennessee. But yeah, I mean, McDaniel, I think can make sense in a way as well. But let's move on to the Giants then, because that's where Dable came from, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this one as well.
I think like if Harbaugh wants to go somewhere, I think that's the spot for sure. It's the New York Giants, a huge brand, huge city, right? We've already talked about Dart a little bit. Like you have the young quarterback that you can do something with. They have weapons with Scatabo, Neighbors. I think if looking at all these teams, I think that's the spot that is would probably be the most desirable for Harbaugh, if I'm being honest.
Okay. I did not have him listed. Of course, I didn't have Harbaugh listed in any spots that I think he really could. Well, actually, no, I do. I have one more, but we'll get to that one later. Um, the two that I have thrown out here, and one is kind of out of left field a little bit, but I think he did get an interview, and then the other one makes I think more sense just based on where guys are at right now. So I had Mike McCarthy listed number one. I think he's definitely trying to get back into things. I don't know whether or not he'll get this role, but I think it could be a fit if he believes in Jackson Dart. The other guy, and I think this is maybe more likely, and this would be just hanging on to who they've got in the interim role right now. What about Mike Kafka? I mean, he's done some things with Dart. You know, they're going to have, again, we talked about earlier, they're going to have some guys coming back that they haven't had for most of the year. I think there's momentum there. And if there's momentum there already and he kind of understands what things were like, you know, when Dable was still there, you know, why not have some continuity with a young quarterback who seems like he's already got some confidence based on how things went this year? So I think that's an opportunity. You know, obviously for him, it would be I believe a first time head coaching job. So that's a big role to fill being in New York. But I think that the Giants may end up just staying with who they've got right now in the building.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it. I don't like it. Like, obviously, when I'm going through my list, I mean, a lot of these names are kind of retreads and what, but yeah, I mentioned Mark McCarthy with another team later, so I'm kind of with you where I think he has the itch to come back, and I'm curious to see how teams feel about him.
Okay, well let's head right into that area then because we've got three teams in the desirable category, and
Hmm.
because we haven't really disagreed too much, I guess we'll just keep it the way it is. So I've got in order from one to three, most desirable to least desirable. I've got the Ravens at number one. I've
Yeah.
got Pittsburgh at number two and Atlanta at number three. So I guess before we even dive into who's who, do you agree with Pittsburgh being number two? Because I've seen them as low as like seven, depending on what outlet you're reading.
No, I'm with you. I think even though it's just because it's the Steelers, it's like I think it's number two, and I know I'm probably biased because they like just kicked my ass for 30 years, but um, like I think the Steelers are number two. Now let me ask you a question because I was going to ask you this question anyways, and you kind of like set it up perfectly for me. Obviously, you've seen all the memes and stuff about like how is Zach Taylor the only one left with an AFC North job, blah blah blah. Even though he's the last one that has been to a Super Bowl, but um, let me ask you this. I was thinking about this yesterday. Let's say the Bengals job was open. Let's say they did fire Zach Taylor. Great. Where do the Bengals slot in here? Do you think the Bengals and the Steelers, like, which job is more desirable, like, right now, would you think, if it
Right
was open?
now, if I'm
Yeah.
not considering the franchise itself, or do I have to consider the franchise itself? I don't think you
I
can
I
take a
I I think everything. Like, you consider everything. If those jobs are open right now and you have the pick of your litter, which one are you taking right now?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, I still think Pittsburgh is a more desirable job. And I'm with you. You kind of alluded to it in not so many words, basically just saying, look, the Pittsburgh franchise, when I think of the banner franchises in the NFL, Pittsburgh comes to mind, San Francisco comes to mind, Green Bay, New England come to mind as like these franchises where there's a reason why Pittsburgh's only had three coaches since 1969. There's consistency there. They have a direction that they want to go. I think to some extent you could argue right now they're kind of at this crossroads where we're going to find out whether or not they truly do have a direction because they do need to change, which is why I think it's a good thing Tomlin stepped down. I think he understood it was time. But in terms of what franchise I would be more confident was going to give me the opportunity to try to do things the way that I had interviewed and said I was going to do things, I think Pittsburgh is the spot there as opposed to Cincinnati where yeah, I mean, there's a leash there for sure as we're seeing because, you know, we don't have to get into it since it's not an opening, but like Zach Taylor's still there. So Cincinnati is not gonna, you know, they don't have their finger on the trigger, if you will. But at the same time, like there's also, I think, some issues there that maybe we've even seen from this season Pittsburgh doesn't necessarily have. And so I would still consider Pittsburgh the more desirable location if both jobs were open. But if Cincinnati was open right now with the talent they have on the field, I think that there would be a lot of guys with some serious resumes that would be lining up to try to get that job.
Yeah, I just think it's an interesting scenario because the reasons you said, yeah, like Pittsburgh has the history. They're a premier franchise in the NFL, but like it's funny because they both have leashes, long leashes for coaches. The difference is it's because the Pittsburgh teams are good every like freaking year. The Bengals have leashes where they cannot be good, and you still have job security. So it's just interesting because then the Bengals have the quarterback. That's the toughest thing to get in the NFL. They have the quarterback, stud receivers. Obviously, the defense needs fixed, whereas the Steelers maybe are a little bit better. Obviously, better defense, but they kind of lack one the quarterback into some of the skill positions. So like I just think it's easier to fix a defense in one off season. You know, if you nail the 10th draft pick and then have a good free agency class, like you can turn around a defense in a year. That doesn't need to be a good defense. They have to be average with that offense. So I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting question because yeah, if you just asked, do you want the Steelers job, Bengals job, Steelers, but given the scenarios, it was kind of interesting to me. But obviously, yeah, like you said, we don't have to worry about it. They didn't fire Zach Taylor yet, um, but yeah, so yeah, I agree totally with your order. The only other thing I wanted to point up was why Falcons over Giants?
The division. For me, the biggest thing was the division. I think you're looking at a Falcons team that has some talent, and it's not a good division. You know, with all due respect to Baker Mayfield, you know, they're now going to be, you know, looking at what's going to happen moving forward, and they're
Yeah,
getting they're getting a little bit older at some key spots. I know they've filled some of those holes this year, or seemingly they have, to be able to kind of, you know, it's like shark's teeth as far as the wide receivers are concerned. But
yeah,
I just think that division is open pretty much every year. And if you've got a guy who wants to hit the ground running, and that's why I have some big names, you know, kind of filled in for um, potential guys that could fill that role in Atlanta. I think you're going to look at that team with whomever they hire because I think they are going to go after somebody with a name, and you're going to say immediately, okay, if they can figure out Penix, because I think he's kind of the question mark right now, then you're looking at a team who can go and win their division probably for the next few years because there's a lot of talent around there.
yeah. That's a great point. That's an absolutely great point because I think they're kind of in similar spots. That just I feel like the Giants have some. The Falcons have good weapons. I mean, they got Drake London, Beach. So yeah, they are very similar to me. You know, it feels like Dart has shown a little more promise than Penix right now, but no, yeah, I think you convinced. The division thing's a really good point. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, with all due respect to Carolina's season this year, they're inconsistent, and I still don't
no
think they trust
frauds.
Bryce Young. Unfortunately, because I like him a lot, Kellen Moore has a very uphill battle in New Orleans, and again, I just I've heard it now for a few years about Tampa Bay and how they're supposed to be a Super Bowl contender, and at the end of the day, they haven't delivered on that. And I think whereas you're looking at Atlanta, where a lot of these are pretty young guys too, Tampa Bay's not as young in some areas. So, but anyway, yeah, I mean, let's focus on. I guess we'll go back to the Steelers because I want to know what your thoughts are on who could take the job, and then we'll talk about the same thing for the Falcons, and then we'll end with the Ravens because I think that's the premier job that's open right now.
So that the Steelers is where I had Mike McCarthy. Um,
Really?
I it's same thing. I don't have great reasons other than like I like close my eyes. I just see like his big old body wearing like a Steelers quarter zip. But like I think the thing that I can't get out of my head is think about the last two teams he's coached, right? What, Green Bay and Dallas? Like it seems like these historic franchises love him for some reason. Um, I mean, he's a good coach. I shouldn't say for some reason, but um, I don't know. I think the toughest thing about the Steelers and trying to figure out where they're going to go is, like you said, what, three coaches since 1960, whatever. Um, like you don't know what they do. Like you don't know what like they like to hire, what they like do, like you have no clue. So I don't know if they're going to go with a coordinator, a young up and coming dude, someone with experience. So like I legit had kind of struggled with this to be honest, but um I don't know. I just kind of slid Mike McCarthy into there just cuz I legit just think like this guy's coached the Packers, Cowboys and Steelers. Like that's probably three of the most prestigious franchises in the league. But um, yeah, outside of that, I didn't really like. I just didn't know like what kind of coach would be good for them because like their offense is kind of stuck in mud. Their defense is good, but like that's kind of their identity. So yeah, it makes sense to go with a defensive dude. But I don't know. Yeah, what do you think?
So with Pittsburgh, you would I think that the thing that you would think with them is that they would go after a big name. But the reality is if you look back to the two guys that they've had now before this opening, Mike Tomlin was a defensive coordinator before he got there, and Bill Cowher was a defensive coordinator before he got there. And I think ultimately, when you think about the Steelers, I think that's the identity that comes to mind is tough defense and figure it out offensively. And frankly speaking, for the most part, that has worked in the AFC North in order to try to win that division. So I have some defensive guys that I think are decent fits there. And I don't think that you can that you have to be afraid to pick guys who may not have had head coaching experience. I do have Brian Flores on this list, but he's a defensive coordinator right now. And then the other guy I have is Jesse Minter. I think Minter fits. I think he's a guy who isn't, there's not a huge ego there. At least it doesn't appear to be a huge ego. And that's the other thing is at the end of the day, like, with these offensive guys that have a style and feel like it's their way, I think that sometimes that can get in the way of things. And you're not going to get that from a guy who has not coached at the head coaching level. So I look at defensive coordinators for the job in Pittsburgh, and I mentioned earlier, I think they might be in a crossroads because they've tried this situation where they are holding on to aging quarterbacks and just kind of hoping they can figure it out, and it hasn't worked for a while. So I think they are going to need to try to maybe do something a little bit different. But will they is the question, number one. And then number two, if you have a defensive coordinator who comes in, are they really gonna they would have to put somebody in that position to help them make that call. As far as if they're gonna change course and do something different than trying to get an aging, experienced quarterback in there to kind of help push things along while they get the job done on the defensive end.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is I hope whoever they hire sucks.
Of
I
course.
know it won't happen. I know it won't happen. They're gonna hire a young up and coming dude, and he's gonna be the next friggin' Vince Lombardi because that's just how the Steelers work, and that's how my sports life works. But um, yeah, we can throw out names all day. Whoever they hire is gonna be a home run hire because it's the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yep, and they'll be there for the next 20 years. So we'll be old men when
Yep,
they finally step down, which
it'll be
is
the warts on my behind.
sobering to think about. Okay, all right. Let's switch then to Atlanta. What are your thoughts, coaches?
So I'll be honest, I didn't have too many thoughts with them either. I mainly wanted to talk about a dude. I think Joe Brady's very interesting to me. We've already talked about that LSU team, and he was kind of the mastermind like behind that. He was kind of running their show. They've always linked him because he was on that team to Bengals openings for OC. Fire Zach Taylor, hire Joe Brady, whatever. It is interesting though because he's with Buffalo right now. Buffalo OC, like a lot of Buffalo people seem to not like him, which is interesting to me. They had the number one rushing offense this year, which obviously it helps having the best running quarterback of all time. So, but I mean, James Cook was also very, very good. They can throw the ball. Like he's always a name that's interesting to me. Of like, where's he going to get a shot? So I penciled him in with Atlanta just because I'm curious to see when he's going to get that chance and make that next step. And who knows? Maybe it's with the Bengals next year. I hope not. I hope they make the playoffs. And if Zach makes the playoffs again, he's got another like 5 years on his contract. But um, I don't know. Joe Brady's just kind of the interesting name to me. It's not so much that I might think it'll happen, but I'd like to see what happens.
Okay. Okay. I'm with you in the sense that I think it's going to be an offensive guy. I think there's too much talent there to
Yeah,
not go after a guy who can harness that power that they're going to have on that side of the ball. So a few of the names that I put on here, I think this is the John Harbaugh landing spot, especially if he just wants to say, "Hey, you know what? I'm sitting in a division that I don't have to slog through every year just to get to the playoffs and have half of my, talent get hurt. Let's go win the division in the NFC South and then see what happens when we get to the playoffs." So I think that's a reasoning why he could be there. I think Kevin Stefanski, his resume when while being in Cleveland kind of speaks for itself. I think he's a guy who knows how to run the offense. So given maybe fewer issues going on at the management level above him, and I'm not saying Atlanta's perfect, but I don't know that you can get a whole lot worse than Cleveland in that regard. Um,
yep,
I think he could have a lot of success. So he's another name, and then yeah, Clint Kubiak is another one. I like what I've seen out of Seattle this year. I I'm not a huge Darnold is the reason guy. I think it's a lot of what the offensive coordinator or the offensive mind is
totally agree.
doing. So I think that he's a good fit, and I think he's ready to take that next step. And he's got some familiarity as well with that division because he was in New Orleans, if I recall correctly. So there's something there about being able to understand what it takes to operate in that division. But those are my three choices. I definitely think they should go offensive though.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, I totally agree.
Last one here. This is pretty much going to wrap it up then. The big one everybody wants to know is the $1 million question. Who do you think that Baltimore is going to take?
I mean, I haven't said his name yet. I just think it'd be friggin' hilarious if this is where Stefanski ended up. Like, Baltimore has stolen so much from Cleveland. And the thought of Stefanski going there and being the one to lead Lamar to like a AFC championship Super Bowl, like it just seems like the most Browns thing ever. Um I mean, as far as fit goes, then yeah, like it's the best job out there. You have Lamar to work with. Like, um, I do think it's a good fit. I think it makes sense. Um, I wouldn't see why the Ravens wouldn't want him. Like, I think of all the names, like he's probably one of the most desirable, has the experience, has proven he can do it. And clearly the roster is going to be better than kind of most of the teams he had in Cleveland, right? So I think that's the one that makes sense. I feel like a lot of people share that same sentiment, which makes me think that it won't happen and something wild will happen. But um, that's kind of who I have as the kind of obvious, hilarious favorite.
Okay. I mean, I have it on my list as well, so I won't go too deeply into that because I do think there's a possibility of it. It would be very, very Browns for it to happen to them, where you get another Art Modell situation, if you will. But yeah, and also disclaimer here because I did mention with the Falcons, I felt they were going to go offensive, but then I mentioned John Harbaugh. I think Harbaugh is the only one, in my opinion, that they would go for that's not a traditionally an offensive guy. But with the Ravens, outside of Stefanski, because I do think he's a good fit, I look at this team and I just think that, yeah, whereas Harbaugh maybe was starting to get a little bit stale there, and I think that there was probably some tension going on with regards to the relationship between him and Lamar Jackson. I think that they're going to have to kind of try to repair that a little bit. And you're obviously thinking longer term than just the next few years, but at the same time, this is what you've got. And I think that an offensive mind would be a good fit in Baltimore. So Stefanski, obviously, he has the ability to get things right with Lamar, but I also think maybe from an offensive schematic perspective, maybe some sexier names out there could be Clint Kubiak or maybe even Cliff Kingsbury. I think that there could be some legitimacy to that as well, and he wouldn't have to go very far because he's already sitting out there in DC right now, and I'm a little bit upset that we're going to lose him and what he's been able to do with Jalen Daniels while he's been healthy. So I think that there's a possibility that Kingsbury gets back into head coaching, and that would be an excellent scenario for him. I think because I think some of the dysfunction with the franchises he's been with previously is what maybe has uh, kind of hurt his reputation a little bit, but he's done a nice job building it back up. And I think at this point, it's at a point where even a team like Baltimore with a lot of consistency there, because they've only had three coaches since 1996, would be willing to give him a real shot.
Yeah, I don't know. The only other thing I'll say about the Ravens is that they're just like the Steelers. It doesn't matter who they're going to hire; they're going to be awesome. Like, it's that's just how life works for the Bengals and the Browns and the AFC North. So, congrats to whoever gets that job. Hell of a career. Enjoy it. Yeah,
Well, good. Well, I think that will hopefully give the listeners something to chew on. So, guys, in addition to
yeah.
the college football playoff question about whether you think home games are good or if you want the bowl system to be intact, let us know what your thoughts are on our very long discussion as far as the coaching carousel is concerned. Hopefully, Brendan, that answers your question. I think we gave as much time to that as we have any topic on conversation so far. So,
Yes. Thank you,
yep,
Brandon.
yep.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it's drop us some predictions. Drop us some predictions and some nice fits. Some maybe there's some names that we missed that like people think would be fun. Like I don't want to keep the conversation going. Sorry, I know we're wrapping up, but like the Marcus Freeman thing's interesting. I know that I don't think it's gonna happen, but it's one of those weird things where there's so much smoke it feels like where it's like, wait a minute, but I mean, people have done that with Ryan Day too, but yeah, drop us some suggestions if we missed anybody, and just let us know some predictions. Who you want as your coach? Who you want as your rivals coach? Yeah, maybe some Jim Bob Cooter.
All right, Colonel. Last question for the episode. We obviously have the NFL divisional round of the playoffs coming up here in a few days. What's your off the wall sporting event that you think everybody should watch going into the weekend?
Ooh, off the wall.
And it doesn't have to be something that's totally obscure, but like for you, outside of the NFL playoffs, what's on
Mm.
on your agenda for this weekend?
So, two big things on my mind. One, these basketball Buckeyes have a big one against UCLA, which they're about the same identical records. So, um, but that's at home. They need to start stringing together some Big Ten wins. That's fine. But there's a big one on Thursday, Thursday, January 15th. The Columbus Blue Jackets are playing the Vancouver Canucks in Columbus. Fine, great, whatever. Vancouver's coach is Adam Foote, the disgraced defenseman who left a sour taste in all Columbus fans' mouth back in the day. That is probably on the top three, maybe five most hated players of all time in Blue Jackets history. So I will be there on Thursday at Nationwide, giving him a nice, warm welcome.
Excellent, excellent. I cannot wait for. Are you going to be making a sign? I know you have a history of that.
I haven't met. They have sign stations there, so I don't know. I might throw something up. Hey Adam, suck egg. Something like that. But there's also his last name's Foot, so there's a lot I can do with that. Amputate foot. Something like that. So, I don't know, I might have to get my sign game out, but I don't know, just want to give him a nice warm welcome and show him that we never forget. We hold grudges.
Excellent, excellent. That is the only way to do sports fandom. Well, for me, it is the Australian Open. For some reason, January, it's not a great time if you're living in the Midwest, and there's not a whole lot to look forward to outside of the NFL playoffs. But for me, the Australian Open, for some reason, has always been something that I've liked watching. And the early rounds start this weekend. They've actually got qualifiers already going on, but the official first round starts on Sunday. So I'm going to be looking forward to that. I had the opportunity to go a couple of years ago, and it was pretty much everything that I had hoped it would be. So I'll watch that for as long as I live. But yeah,
And hey, I last thing I want to say is I would love to hop on here another month or two. We got the Olympics right around the corner.
that's right. That's right.
And I'm a big Winter Olympic guy. I know summer's the popular one, whatever. I've always loved the winter ones more. So I would love to do an episode to preview a little bit of Olympics. Wouldn't mind getting the thumbnail on here and maybe doing a little bit of competition we could think about a little bit as far as medals and countries. I think it'd be a blast. So
I think that's a great idea. I've got some ideas that I've been toying around with for the Olympics as well. So, yeah, I'm glad to hear that there's interest there. And listeners, you're probably going to hear from the Colonel again. So, hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Hopefully you enjoy the weekends. We just gave you a few things to chew on in addition to the NFL. But wherever you're watching and whatever you're watching, hopefully it's a good time. And until next time, take it easy, Shuckers.
see you.